the 24th of March 1603, the Tudor dynasty and the era came to an end as the long-reigning and beloved Queen Elizabeth I took her final breaths inside of Richmond Palace. Elizabeth was known as the Virgin Queen, and she never had any children or heirs, and the King of Scotland, James, was invited to take the throne. There was a lot of uncertainty across England. However, the cause of her death has never been truly worked out. It's been said by some that she may have suffered with cancer or that she had some form of heart failure, but in her final months, Elizabeth I suffered with severe depression as many of her loyal friends and ladies died around her. She had by the end of her days given up. But after her death, her remains were subjected to the rough and brutal embalming ordeal that was against her wishes. In this, Elizabeth's heart was removed and was cut out of her body and was then placed elsewhere into a box. But shockingly, decades after her death, the box containing the last Tudor Queen's heart was opened by a curious young boy who then actually touched it. He touched the heart of Elizabeth I. Elizabeth was a woman loved by her people, and she once claimed that she had the heart of a king and a king of England when people questioned her strength as a queen. She had throughout her life been in relatively good health, but as a number of her friends and loyal followers died around her, she became depressed, and she often was in deep bouts of melancholy, where she contemplated the losses that she had suffered by, but also inflicted. It was said that she, at length, thought about one particular execution that she had ordered, that being the death of her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. She believed that this execution would prevent her getting into heaven, as she ordered the killing of another anointed queen, someone who many believed had been sent by God to rule, but Elizabeth knew by late 1602 that something was wrong, and she retired to Richmond Palace, where she then felt more comfortable. She would refuse the treatment that was offered to her, and often spent a lot of time just sitting aimlessly. She claimed in her final days that "I am not well," and that she was ready to leave the world, and the Archbishop Whitgift was summoned to pray for her soul and to guide the Queen through her final moments. He took vigils by her bedside and told her that she would get better if she want, but it was clear to those that the Queen was slipping away. In her final moments she could not communicate, and she just instead squeezed the churchman's hands, acknowledging that she had not slipped away and was still in fact there. It was claimed during these moments that he examined her first of her faith, and she so punctually answered all of his several questions by lifting up her eyes and holding up her hand, as it was a comfort to all those the beholders. Then the good man told her plainly what she was, and what she was to come to, and though she had been long a great queen here upon earth, yet shortly she was to yield an account of her stewardship to the King of Kings. After this he began to pray, and all that were thereby did answer him. After he had continued long into prayer, till the old man's knees were weary, he blessed her, and meant to rise and leave her. The Queen made a sign with her hand, "My sister," knowing her meaning, told the bishop the Queen desired he would pray still. He did so for long half an hour after, and then thought to leave her. The second time she made signs to have him continue in prayer. He did so for half an hour more, with earnest cries to God for her soul's health, which he uttered with the fervency of spirit, as the Queen, to all our sight, much rejoiced thereat, and gave testimony to all of us her Christian and comfortable end. By this time it grew late, and every one departed, all but her woman that attended her. But Elizabeth I passed away on the 24th of March 1603. Elizabeth had stipulated a number of requests that she did not want to occur to her body and her remains after her death. She specifically did not like the idea of being embalmed in the royal manner, this being having her internal organs, including her heart, cut out from her corpse, and this would then be buried elsewhere from her body, and this was practice that was performed during the Tudor period, and Jane Seymour, the third wife of King Henry VIII, Elizabeth's father, even had her heart buried in Hampton Court Palace, with her body being interred in Windsor. The doctors got to work embalming Elizabeth's remains, and they worked quickly to make sure they had the best chances of preserving her body. They, while she was still inside of the bedchambers, made a large incision into her chest, and they then cut out her heart. Her entrails and internal organs were also cut out, and then placed within a lead casket. These were to be buried somewhere, but it is not specifically known where. As Elizabeth did not want this to happen, she did not carry instructions as to what to do with her heart. Weeks later, the funeral of Elizabeth I occurred and took place inside of London, and a huge burial ceremony took place, and James I, the new English king, the very son of Mary, Queen of Scots, was respectful to the woman who ordered his mother's death. He gave Elizabeth a large ceremony, and it was claimed Queen Elizabeth was interred with great pomp in Westminster Abbey, at which time the city of Westminster was surcharged with multitudes of all sorts of people in the streets, houses and windows and gutters, who came to see the obsequy. And when they beheld her statue or effigy lying on the coffin, set forth in royal robes, having a crown upon the head thereof, and a ball and sceptre in either hand, there was such a great sighing, groaning, and weeping, as the like hath not been seen or known in the memory of man, neither does any history mention any people, time, or state. This same effigy or statue used for Elizabeth I, it's believed, is still inside of Westminster Abbey, but Elizabeth was buried inside of the same vault and grave as her sister Mary I. Another account says, the corpse of the late Queen lay in state at St. James's for more than 3 weeks whilst the mourning clothes and funeral arrangements were prepared. On December 12th, when all was ready, her funeral cortege formed in the courtyard of the palace for the solemn procession to Westminster. The funeral procession came to rest at the great door of Westminster Abbey, and Elizabeth I's body was taken inside. It was said that 100 poor men in black gowns kept watch over her body all the night, holding long torches in their hands, and around them the soldiers of the royal guard stood with their staff torches. The next day the Requiem Mass was sung. When the eulogy was over, the coffin was carried to Henry VII's Lady Chapel in the Abbey and placed in a grave on the north side. Her heart, being severally enclosed in a coffin covered with velvet bound with silver, was separately interred. The household officers broke their staves and threw them into the grave. As they did so, the trumpets sounded to signal the beginning of the funeral banquet. The chief mourners went to dinner, leaving the funeral trappings unguarded. In a few minutes, the servants and hired mourners and the Londoners who had come to see the Queen laid in her grave had torn down the banners and standards, the arms displayed around the altar, and the hangings fastened to the walls. They scrambled and fought over another for scraps of cloth until the embroidered cloths were in shreds, and the Queen's effigy pulled into 100 pieces. So it was recorded at the time that the heart of Queen Elizabeth I was actually interred elsewhere inside of Westminster Abbey. This decision must have been made by the Lord Chamberlain or those within the royal circles, but it was kept inside of the lead casket within a box close to where her body had been buried. But this would not be the end of the story of the last Tudor Queen's heart. In 1670, over 60 years since Elizabeth I had died, the casket containing her heart was found by a curious young boy named William Tazwell. He was a choir boy by all accounts, and he later became a priest of a church in Bermondsey. He was working inside of Westminster Abbey, and he came across one of the depositories, and in this he looked at the box which held the heart of Elizabeth I. He looked inside of this and noticed in fact 2 hearts, one belonging to Elizabeth's half-sister, Mary I, also as well as the final Tudor queens. The royal vault had been opened at the time for the funeral of the Duke of Albemarle, and it was claimed that within niches were the urns, one with the name of Queen Mary, the other that of Queen Elizabeth. I dipped my hand into each and took out each a king of gluttonous red substance, somewhat resembling mortar. Mary's urn contained the least moisture, This young boy actually had his hands on the actual heart of a woman who is considered one of England's greatest ever monarchs and rulers. The young boy took advantage of the access he was granted inside of the royal vaults, but he probably never expected to find the heart of Elizabeth I inside of the box and may have been terrified by what he found. The heart had remained protected for some years, but he claimed it resembled mortar and still had red blood-like substances on the heart. It is a forgotten and disturbing story, and is one that leads to the question, does Elizabeth I's heart still exist today? There are no other accounts of her heart casket being broken into, but it's more probable that it still exists in some form inside of Elizabeth I's burial vault. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.